Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and part 2 of our preview of MLS's Eastern Conference for the 2025 season. Today, we're going up and down the Eastern time zone with a quick stop in Nashville to let you know about all the runners and riders we didn't cover in part 1 of this preview. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today once again is your friend, is my friend, is the Taylor Rocco. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. Graham Upton's here. You excited, Graham?
Yes, I am. Hello, Ryan Bailey.
And hello, Joe Lowry. How are you, sir?
I'm glad you brought us back down to normal talking speed because I know I talk quickly. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to talk quickly enough to one-up what Graham and Taylor had already done. It's good to be back, fellas.
Yeah.
I like it.
It was go up a level like Brian from Family Guy or go down again. I chose down.
You made the right tactical decision, I think.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I tell you, I made a poor tactical decision, Joe, in buying MLS Season Pass at full value when I'm a 2Mobile customer. And apparently, on Tuesday, which is possibly today, it's going to be free for T-Mobile, which is disappointing.
Well, and even on top of that, I think you made a bad call about buying Season Pass when maybe you could have emailed MLS and maybe they would have given it to you. That, I don't know, feels like a consideration.
Look at this guy over here.
No, I'm just saying, guys, we're going to be doing an MLS show every week. How many other places are doing that? No, I mean, there are other places, but not a lot of them.
Not all of us, Joe, have the Don's phone number on speed dial.
Believe me, I don't have the Don's phone number on speed dial, but yeah, I feel like maybe we can solve this problem for future years.
I don't know, Joe. I emailed MLS at MLS.com with an email that just read, "Me want MLS, me want season pass, please. Me season pass, please?" ? And they have not responded.
No, I thought you told me they did respond, but only with like land and real estate listings in your area at MLS.com.
Well, there was that, yes.
And you
The multi-listing server was my problem. You are correct.
P.S. Doyle said okay. I think that's how you finish that email.
Okay. Maybe I shouldn't have emailed Don G at MLSsoccer.com because that's just dong at MLSsoccer.com. Anyway, I actually apply a 20% tip to all Apple purchases anyway because I like them so much. So I'm glad I paid it.
That makes sense. Yeah, Apple, Lulu, and Chili's, the big three.
That's it, the triumvirate. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Shows where you'll get our bonus content, including bonus episodes, lots more MLS chat, bonus video, and of course, access to our Discord server where all the cool kids are hanging out. Thank you to everybody who supports us via that medium. And once again, if you'd like to see our beautiful visages on YouTube, we put these episodes on YouTube as well. Graham is voguing as I speak to show the visual technology we are employing. Cameras. All right, let's get to our MLS Eastern Conference previews, part 2. To remind you, we're going to go through sort of a summary of what each team did last season, what's changed in the offseason, the moves and shakes in and out, how we think they're going to play, reasons for optimism and pessimism, and, of course, the coveted TSS very specific prediction for each team. We kick off this show with Nashville Graham. Nashville Graham should be your performing name, actually. Graham Nash is taken, but Nashville Graham is one for you. Nashville obviously missed the playoffs for the first time last season, have a new coach, of course, and some solid DPs. What are we thinking about Nashville this season, Graham?
Yeah, so as you say, Ryan, 2024 was a bad season for Nashville as they missed out on the playoffs for the first time as an MLS team. Hani Mukhtar, of course, previous MVP, their star man, got injured early in the season, so he had his least productive campaign as a Nashville player. And then Gary Smith was fired after just 11 games of the season. So the season very quickly became about resetting and preparing for 2025. BG Callahan, i.e. Patches O'Houlihan, our favourite, was appointed in August, and there was an improvement, but only a moderate one, I think it's fair to say. But 2024 was very much the end of an era for Nashville, and that era was their first cycle as an MLS team. It was largely successful. They were a playoff team. They maybe punched above their weight a little bit as a perceived kind of small market, although they've got a very nice stadium that they sell out regularly. But now they're having to transition into something else, and this is a rebuild for Nashville. And it's been a tricky one because they have an aging squad, so it hasn't been easy for them to offload players. They've got 3 filled DP spots as well. One of those is filled by Hani Mukhtar, the other one Sam Surridge, the other one Walker Zimmerman. So they haven't really been able to. You look at Atlanta when we talk about their rebuild, they go and spend a fortune on big name DPs, and Nashville haven't really been able to do that. They haven't really been able to bring in the elite level talent that might have immediately moved the needle. But they've still done some squad reconstruction. They've declined options on Anunga. Animal Godoy goes to San Diego in the expansion draft. They traded away Sean Davis, bought out Randall Leal's contract. Shaq Moore and Lucas McNaughton are also gone. In terms of the incoming signings, they brought in Gaston Brugman from the Galaxy to strengthen that midfield unit. Brian Acosta is back in MLS this season with Nashville. Edvard Tagseth is joined from Rosenborg in Norway as well, who is a midfielder, as far as I'm aware, a bit more of a sort of attack-minded midfielder. So the centre of the pitch does seem to have been a priority for them in the off-season. And we started to see a stylistic shift last season when Callahan replaced Smith. Smith obviously was someone who favoured a suffer ball approach, and Nashville would then counter on teams to try and win games. Callahan, on the other hand, wants his team to have more of the ball. He wants to construct using possession. That's a big shift for Nashville. I think the sense is that maybe this shift is going to take more than one season, certainly more than one window to get the players in that they need to make that work. And Callahan is obviously someone who worked alongside Berhalter with the US, came through the coaching tree at the same time at US Soccer, so his broad outlook is very similar to Greg Berhalter, and pressing is a big part of what he wants to do with Nashville, and we started to see that movement towards a high press and more energy at a possession once Callahan took over in the final months of last season. So that's something to keep an eye out for this year. I think it's interesting that I mentioned the midfield rebuild, but just to hit home that point, out of the 6 players that played in central midfield for Nashville last year, only one of them is coming back for 2025. Brugman will be a starter, so will Tagseth as one of the more advanced midfielders in the team. Could be quite narrow, could be a 4-2-2-2, 4-2-2-2. I always make sure to get right the number of twos when I mention that formation. Could be quite narrow, but with a little bit of freedom for the players further forward in the attacking midfielders to cover a lot of ground. I think that's going to be something Tagseth in particular has been brought in to do, is cover a lot of ground, make that system work. I am optimistic about Nashville's chances this season if Hani Mukhtar can stay fit and rediscover his output of past seasons. Of course, when he's on top form, he's pretty much as good as any attacking player in MLS. I am also pessimistic, by the same token, I'm also pessimistic that we have seen what this Nashville team is when Mukhtar is either missing, or even when he was back, maybe not quite the force of old. And also Walker Zimmerman was out injured as well last season. So you take those 2 players out of the team and Nashville all of a sudden start to look pretty ordinary. So those 2 players staying fit is imperative for having a good season. And the reality is they just don't have the top end talent elsewhere to beat teams in the league if they don't have players like Mukhtar on form and fit. So I think having a stable year compared to last year will help grow this team and help move this team forward. I think Patrick Yazbek is a player who has the potential to become a key pillar for this team. I think he gives Nashville a touch more forward dynamism than they used to have in the middle under Gary Smith. But I think subtle improvement is what I'd expect from Nashville this season, and a playoff finish would probably make for a good year for them. Finally, my VSP for Nashville is that they will rise above 385 completed passes per match this season. They were at 356 last season. That doesn't sound like a big rise, but that would lift them from being one of the worst teams in MLS to be like 20. I think they were 24th last season for that metric. That would put them into the top 14 in teams in MLS for that metric. So I think that's going to reflect their shift under BJ Callahan from being a counter-attacking team under Gary Smith to being a more possession-oriented team. But I still wouldn't put them in like that upper echelon because I think they maybe don't have the players to make that truly work yet.
Yeah, I don't think this Nashville team is going to be great. I think they will be more fun this year than they were last year. And I think that's what a lot of what you've got, Nat Graham, of some of the pieces that they've added in midfield and even looking towards the attack as well, and the tactical changes that are going to come. I don't think with a Mukhtar, Sturridge, and Walker Zimmerman DP trio that you can be, at least with the other pieces that are in this team, I don't think there's enough top-end talent for them to be like blitzing teams and having a ton of success this year. But I am looking forward to, for the first time maybe ever, to actually watching Nashville this season. And I know that that's not really the thing that matters, but for fans who are at the beginning more so of a little bit of a squad refresh that I think is going to take maybe 3 or 4 windows, that is something, and I hope Nashville fans enjoy it.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you very much, Graham. Joe, let's come to you and talk about the New England Revolution. I'm going to be completely honest here. I thought they were rubbish last year. One of the worst performances I've ever seen when they came to Charlotte, I've got to admit. But they've made some moves, right? So, optimism. Yay?
they've made a ton of moves, and I'll get to a lot of those moves very, very shortly. Last season, Ryan, to touch on them being rubbish, yeah, they were. They were terrible last year. 31 points, 14th in the Eastern Conference, 26th in Major League Soccer. 2024 was a no-good, very bad, horrible year for Caleb Porter's team. They allowed the third most goals in a single season in MLS history. We are now entering the league's 30th season. That's a lot of goals, 74 goals last year. The attack wasn't healthy or effective, and they ended up wasting a year of Carles Hill's prime, which is maybe not prime, that's a bit unfair, but either way, wasting a year of Carles Hill is a big no-no as the clock ticks a bit for the former MVP. The summer transfer window brought real, major, necessary changes. Multiple starting defenders were shipped out. Alassane Youssef and Luca Langoni joined in the midfield and forward lines, respectively. Peyton Miller, who listeners now know I'm a big fan of, had his chance to shine down the stretch, but really, the positives were very few and far between. Looking forward, there's good news. It's Major League Soccer. You are never more than a few transfer windows away from competing again. FC Cincinnati proved that. The Galaxy proved that. You can turn this team over. And if you ask Caleb Porter, after a busy offseason and a busy summer, New England looked ready to compete. Porter said this earlier in the offseason, quote, "We had good players here. They just didn't happen to be the right players," he added later. Then he said, "They're still good players, but now we have the right players. Now this is my team. These are my players. I've picked them, and I'm confident in the blueprint I have." Credit to Caleb Porter. He's made it very, very clear. If this team is good, he deserves credit. If this team is not good, he and Kurt Onalfo deserve blame. It is that simple at this point. What has changed in the offseason? Who are these players that Porter has brought in to be his players? Well, in terms of incomings, Leo Campana is in. He's arriving for a record amount of allocation money in an intra-MLS deal from Inter Miami. He will be the starting striker. Ignatius Ganago on loan from Nantes in Ligue 1. He has a potential to extend that loan past midseason and could be a DP if that loan is extended. The Revs think quite highly of him and aren't opposed to making him a DP if he hits. They've brought in two new starting center backs, or players they believe will be starting center backs. Mamadou Fofana, who's a veteran of the top couple of tiers in France. He's 27. And Brian Ceballos, a 23-year-old on a big money TAM deal. Both of those players will be quite well paid for their positions. The expectation is for them to be starters with Brandon Bai most likely on the right, and either Will Sands or Peyton Miller, my money's on Peyton Miller by midseason, to be the starter on the left of a four-person back line. They also brought in Ile Feingold, U22 initiative right back from Israel. They've revamped some of the midfield. Jackson Yule's in. He joined most recently from the San Jose Earthquakes. Noel Buck is back from that brief loan spell in England that everybody forgot happened. His development seems to have stalled. We'll see if that changes. Maxi Aruti's in the front line as well. There have been a ton, an absolute truckload of changes for the Revolution. They are a very, very different team when you factor in Youssef and Langoni arriving last window. There's also other depth pieces that I didn't mention because we just don't have time. How do we think this team is going to play? The outgoing players, my bad. The outgoing players, to make room for all those new signings, Giacomo Vrioni was traded to CF Montreal, opening up a DP spot that Ganago could end up filling. He was moved for a bag of peanuts. The Revs didn't value him very highly, and CF Montreal didn't have to shell out very much. Esmir Baraktarovic, his move to PSV funded a lot of that allocation money to get Campana. Dave Romney, Mark-Anthony Kaye, Ian Harkes are all gone to Bruce Arena's San Jose Earthquakes. Bruce gets his guys. Dylan Barrero's gone. Nick Lima, also now in San Jose. Xavier Arriaga's gone. Tim Parker's gone, and that's not even the whole list. Like, this is almost a completely different team than it was at this time last year. And again, that's what Caleb Porter wants. Now, tactically speaking, Porter likes to play in a 4-2-3-1, likes to keep the ball when possible, but he's not going to push the Revs too much in any single stylistic direction. They're not going to commit to possession like the Crew or like CF Montreal. They're not going to press like the Union are going to this year. They're not going to play direct like DC, and they're not going to sit deeper and play against the ball like Charlotte. They're going to shade towards being ball dominant. Carles Steele's going to work his magic in the final third. Like that is kind of the recipe. And if your players are good, that recipe works out just fine. Porter's job this year is about finding the best spots and finding the best players to actually be on the field in this sea of change that's happened for the Revolution over the offseason. Reasons for optimism. This squad is so different than the one that was on the field last year, and they're going to be better. That team last year was horrible. Youssef looks really promising in midfield. I like his game a lot. He's dynamic, good ball progressor. I think he's going to be a strong player for them. The center backs literally cannot be worse than what they had last year, even though I think it's risky bringing in two center backs to be starters together. From abroad, I think that's not always a recipe for success. The bar was just so low. The attack is going to be strong and it's fairly steady with Leo Campana and Carles Hill as that duo and some talented players rotating around them on the wings. This is a better team, straight up, than it was last year. The concern is we don't really know how much better it's going to be. Is it going to be better enough? I don't know. Will two center backs coming in from abroad actually hit? I'm not so sure. Is Campana really going to be a difference maker? I think he's going to be good. Will he be great? The same questions for the wingers. Are Chancalay or Langoni or are any of those guys going to hit? Chancalay, I'm not nearly as high on as a lot of other folks are. I just don't know that the top end production is going to be there. Can they get decent play out of the double pivot next to Yusuf, whether that's Matt Polster, who's aging, or Jackson Ewell, who I don't think is like a great MLS players? There are just so many questions about this team. And I found in my years of kind of previewing teams and looking at teams heading into seasons in MLS, the teams that I tend to have, or that whoever tends to have a lot of natural questions about, are the teams that probably don't do all that well, right? The more unknowns that there are, it's just not always a great recipe for success. So I'm a bit worried about the Revs this year. They could be a solid team. They could solidly be a playoff team. That is absolutely within the realm of possibility. Or they could be one of the poorer teams in the East. I don't think they're a spoon threat at all. I don't think they're a shield threat. They're somewhere in that mushy middle. My VSP, the Revs have 3 double-digit scores in 2025, but no single player will score more than 14 goals. That's my VSP. New England didn't have a double-digit score last year, period. They will have that this year. I think after all these different attacking signings over the last 2 windows, they're going to have a couple of guys, at least, and I'm predicting 3, that are going to hit 10-plus goals in the regular season. I just don't think there is a single dominant, like, A1 goal scorer in this team. Campana could snag 14, maybe. Ganago could hit 10. Chancalay, Langoni could be somewhere in there, too. I just don't think there's an 18-goal guy in this group, and that's part of my concern. Like, a little bit of a microcosm of my worry for this Revs team is I'm not sure I believe in the top-end talent. And if you don't believe in the top-end talent, and there's maybe not quite enough top-end talent, man, suddenly some of the potential cracks in the back line and in midfield start to look a little worrying.
Joe, strangely enough, a lot of your preview reflects the New England preview I did last year, I believe, including
Nice.
my kind of concern as to who is going to score the goals and how many would be scored. I like that you tripled up because my prediction last year was that Esmir Bayraktarovic would have, I believe, 10 combined goals and assists. He got like 4, I think. So he didn't quite reach that hype. I like that you've tripled down.
Yeah, and I've tried to find the middle ground between, this team's going to be better. They're going to have some double-digit scorers, but they're not going to be Miami or Cincinnati in how they attack and create chances for their actual goal scorers, and those guys aren't going to convert like some of the other top players in this league. The Revs will be better, just the huge season-defining question is how much.
Wow. They scored 37 last year, Joe, so if they got 3 double-digit scorers, they're on the way to improvement.
On the way, baby. On the way. The bar is in the basement, but they are on the way.
Maybe a revolution's coming, maybe it's not to New England. We shall see. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're kicking off with the New York teams. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our Eastern Conference Preview Part 2. We go now to New York City, as Laszlo would say, for New York City FC, who kick off in Fort Lauderdale at Inter Miami this coming weekend. Last year, they finished in 6th in the East under Nick Cushing, ended their playoff run against eventual finalists and New Jersey neighbours, the Red Bulls. More on them shortly. Made some changes, of course, in the offseason. Nick Cushing out. He was has been part of the City Group since 2006. I guess that's before the City Group was a thing. He was a coach at Manchester City. Replaced with a guy with very much the same haircut or lack thereof, Pascal Janssen, a Dutchman born in London, briefly managed AZ Alkmaar, and most recently was in Hungary with Ferencváros. The team changes so far in the off-season for New York City. Maybe they need more of them. We'll get into that in a minute. But in pre-season, we saw some minutes for Nicolas Cavallo, super draft picked out of UCLA. A bit of a defensive depth option with Prince Amponsah, signed to a homegrown contract, known as the best left-footed centre-back in college, according to a NYCFC blog I found. And Jacob Araye, another homegrown signing, a 17-year-old central midfielder. Veteran midfielder Maxi Morales also re-signed at the ripe old age of 37. In terms of departures, we've seen academy product left-back Christian McFarlane sold to Manchester City as well, so he's off. And as we record, Santiago Rodriguez might be on his way out. Looks like he's on his way out, so we will see there as well. So I think they might have some more work to do in terms of maybe bringing in some quality at this point to NYCFC, but we'll see about that one. But, had a solid defense last season. Burke Reese and Thiago Martins as centre-backs, and Matt Freese, of course, behind them. Although I don't think Martins has played any minutes in pre-season. For defensive midfield, obviously we've got Keaton Parks, who's been captain for a few of the pre-season games as well, in Thiago Martins' absence. James Sands, of course, obviously a notable absence I should have included in the departures, off to St. Pauli on loan, who at the weekend actually picked up a fairly serious injury. Yeah, not good. So all the best to James Sands. It looks like he might be out for a while. We've had homegrown player, teenager Jonathan Shaw playing that kind of sand role with Keaton Parks in preseason so far. And also Justin Hack, popular player on the show, I think homegrown player who can maybe step up as well. The Janssen coaching style, he's mainly preferred a 4-3-3 or the 4-2-3-1 kind of formation in the past, known for an aggressive and high-intensity style. We're talking quick transitions, pressing opponents high up the pitch, and maintaining possession to create scoring opportunities. Sporting director David Lee says, Pascal brings fantastic experience and a style of play that aligns with our philosophy. He wants to play an entertaining and attacking style that will create chances and
You really need
goals.
to get off LinkedIn, Ryan.
I'm reading this out because it feels like the quote you say about everything.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it's quite generic, isn't it? I'm sure our fans will enjoy watching and help compete for trophies. Yada, yada, yada from Sporting Director David Lee. Reasons for optimism for NYCFC? Solid squad from last season, I guess. New coach with decent experience in Europe. They're playing an aggressive and hopefully entertaining style, as the quote from LinkedIn previously outlined. And generally, with this franchise, when things are ticking over well, it seems they usually perform well and finish quite well in the standings when there's no sort of spanners in the works, so to speak. Concerns, injuries and departures in defensive line. Tevin Gray at right back has been injured in pre-season. Obviously, McFarlane is out, departed as well. So super draft pick Nicolas Cavallo might be thrust into the action, maybe a bit earlier than expected. And as mentioned, Jonathan Shaw coming in to fill in for Sands as well. So there might be some homegrown and younger players sort of filling in the gaps a little bit. And maybe this team will lack a bit of experience at its core. But, spine of the team, as mentioned, been pretty rock solid previously. Maybe some new younger faces will accentuate that. But it's all maybe a little bit untested at this point. My very specific prediction concerns Augustin Ojeda, 20-year-old left winger, has arrived with plenty of fanfare from Racing Club last year. An approving from Joe there, possibly.
Oh, I love me some Augustin Ojeda. Keep going.
Excellent, yeah. So last season, only 3 goals across 25 appearances, end up a bit of a bit part player at the end of the season. I'm expecting a fresh
18 goals in
start
an MLS All-Star. Oh, sorry. No, that was yesterday. My bad.
It's going to be 22.
There it is.
Expected to get a fresh start under Janssen here. I think Joe is obviously bullish on him as well. I think he's going to get more of a shot in this system. Definitely on the left wing with Malachi Jones working his way back after his leg break last season as well. He'll be complemented by his countryman Julian Fernandez on the other wing as well. Matt Doyle actually was pretty high on confidence. I think he had a piece where he mentioned he'll have a breakout season. That's good enough for me to say he doubles his goal output from last season. 6 or more goals for Ojeda. Yay.
And Doyle's ego grew 3 sizes that day. I love the Ojeda shout. I absolutely love that Ojeda shout. I also love Matt Doyle, who is the GOAT of MLS analysis. I think improvement for NYCFC this year, based off of what we know now, is going to have to come through players like Ojeda. It's going to have to come through him and Julian Fernandez, and them getting Malachi is an incredible way to say the name Malachi. It's going to be Malachi Jones getting back from his serious leg injury. It's going to look like them getting increased attacking production out of the young players, assuming they replace Santi Rodriguez, because it does look like he's going to Botafogo for a reported $17 million, which is an insane amount of money for John Textor to pay for Santi Rodriguez, even though I think he is quite good. That is pure insanity to me. Assuming they replace Rodriguez with another number 10, which I think is a safe assumption. I suppose it's not a guarantee of that player being as good as Santi, because City Football Group can't resist signing 12-year-old Argentine players for this NYCFC team. But if they replace Santi with someone of relatively equal standing, it's going to have to come from Ojeda and Malachi Jones and from Fernandez improving, because they've done nothing to this team. Ryan, you rightly led your incoming players with a UCLA draft pick. Like, they have done nothing over this offseason, nothing of note in terms of actually strengthening this team. I'd be worried if I was an NYCFC fan. While a lot of other Eastern Conference teams are strengthening, and by the end of this episode we'll have talked about all of them. You've sat on your hands and also sent your best defensive midfielder to St. Pauli, and now he's hurt. So, yeah, it's hard to feel particularly bullish on NYCFC right now.
Yeah, it does seem a little bit underwhelming if you're a fan to look at this off-season, Joe. But maybe things will be great. Who knows?
They're not going to be bad. They're not going to be bad at all. Are they going to be actually good? I'm skeptical.
All right. Well, why don't we turn our attention to the other team in New York, or New Jersey more specifically, Taylor. New York Red Bulls up next. Obviously went the distance last season. Eric Maxson Choupo-Moting is in.
He is.
What do we think?
We think it's going to be an interesting season, and that could be an interesting season in a very good way or a somewhat negative way. I am mixed, but I'm excited to talk about the Red Bulls. Your preview summary would be, in Forsberg, we trust and pray and desperately hope stays healthy. Because last season, he comes in, they started hot, they faded in the second half, and then they got hot in the playoffs. But it felt like they were maybe treading water for a chunk of the season. That's when Forsberg is injured. That's when they move Frankie Amaya on. They sell him to Toluca and Liga MX for $4 million, so a good bit of business, but they wait almost 2 months to bring in his replacement, Felipe Carballo, Carballo, depending on your pronunciation. And so I think if they didn't go on that run in the playoffs, it would have felt like just another kind of standard Red Bull season in which they don't really spend a ton, and even when they do spend a ton, it doesn't really elevate them. But then they have that playoff run, and there's a kind of an idea that Sandro Schwartz, the manager, found a formation that works, found an approach, and now we are poised for a really strong season. And I think they are. But I also see how if you remove the rose-colored glasses or the Red Bull-colored glasses for a moment, and you then maybe add a bit more like objectivity and scrutiny to their lineup, I have concerns, but I still end up being pretty positive about this team. In terms of what has changed, they lose left-back John Tolkien. He's sold to Holstein Kiel. We've talked about that transfer on the show a couple different times. They lose center-back Andres Reyes. They sell him to San Diego for $750,000 in GAM. They lose 23-year-old striker Elias Manuel. He's traded to RSL for $700,000 in GAM. A lot of GAM pickups along the way. And he was a good depth option, Manuel. He had 9 goals and 4 assists in all competitions. He was a good sort of second striker off the bench. Because Dante Van Zier had an up-and-down season, eventually sold to Ghent for $3 million in a move that is probably okay with everybody involved. He had a better 2024 than 2023, but still not really what you were wanting for, hoping for in terms of a designated player signing and a designated player attacker at that. So he is gone. The business they have done, so if you look at what they did in their sales, it was basically like starting striker, starting attacker, starting forward, replacement striker, center back, left back. They have brought in a couple different left backs, Raheem Edwards, veteran left back, and then Marcelo Morales, left back. Morales is 21 years old. He was playing in the Chilean top flight. I think he is seen as the long-term John Tolkien replacement to maybe Edwards starts at the beginning of the season, and then Morales kind of finds that starting spot his own maybe midway through the season, if not sooner. They bring in Alexander Hack from Al Qadsiya in Saudi Arabia. Prior to that, he was with Mainz for a good chunk of time, and he has existing connections to Sandro Schwartz from his time with Mainz. So there's an existing relationship there. They needed a ball-playing center back or a center back who was at least a bit more comfortable with the ball at his feet, and the idea would be that Alexander Hack will be that. They bring in Victor Bogasz, U22 striker from the Polish second division, for $2 million. That's a lot of money to spend for a 20-year-old, but they've got him on a 4-year deal, and I think he is seen as one for the future. So you've got your depth striker option replaced, and then the aforementioned Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, 35 years old at time of recording, 36 years old in early March, but is already looking sharp, and I think will bed in quite nicely with this team. This team will play under Sandro Schwartz, most likely in a 3-4-1-2, which is what they settled upon in the playoffs. Schwartz has talked in the preseason about how we might still see the 4-2-2 on occasion. It seems like the 3-4-1-2 was working quite well for them. Not as much heavy metal pressing. We've talked about that a number of different times, how with the Red Bulls you expect them to be pressing, and that's not really as much their identity these days. There's going to be pressing triggers. There will be some pressing, just not the full-on. But they are still pretty blunt in their attack. 6th most direct attack in the league last season. They were, I think, had the 2nd most goal kicks taken long. They are trying to get it out, and they are trying to then kind of go at you and make you uncomfortable. And they've got the personnel to do that. They've got a lot of youngsters. That's a reason for optimism for this team. The Utes coming through. Daniel Edelman had already established himself as a starting central midfielder. He's only 21 years old. It'll be him and Carballo in the middle of that 3-4-1-2. It'll be those two midfielders there. Peter Stroud is a 22-year-old central midfielder who could get minutes this year. Ronald Donker is a 20-year-old. He is also on Doyle's potential breakout list. He replaced Amaya until Cabarro arrived. I saw him described as a discount Tyler Adams, but with slightly more attacking creativity. We'll see if he can justify that hype. And speaking of hype, there is Julian Hall, 16 years old, 17 in March. He got 149 minutes last season for the senior team, but close to 1,400 minutes for Red Bull 2. And he is one who could get more minutes at senior level. Not saying he's going to get 1,000 or more, but I think there's evidence that the youngsters are doing just fine, and Red Bull continues to do pretty well in identifying local talent and bringing them through. I think between the number of young players on the roster who were there last season, who are kind of pulling in the right direction, combined with the logical business, combined with a remaining designated player spot, makes me think that Red Bulls could be poised for a very strong and successful season. There are concerns. There is the question of who can replace John Tolkien. Wasn't as significant in terms of actual goals and assists, but I think he was third on the team in progressive carries, fifth on the team in progressive passes, and played a ton of minutes for them. So how do you replicate those numbers and those minutes? Hopefully, in those replacements I mentioned previously, they will have found an option. And then there's the Emil Forsberg situation, because in that 3-4-1-2, he is the one, and if you don't have him, you don't really have anyone who can do that job particularly well. And so if he misses another huge chunk of the season, not really sure how the Red Bulls navigate that one, and it probably requires some formation shifting. It probably requires changing the plans a bit. They don't really have anybody who can come in and deputize, certainly not to his level. And again, it wasn't like he had a massive season in terms of goals and assists. He was good. He was significant. He had 9 goals and 4 assists. But I think it's how much better that attack looked when he was in there and how fluid they looked in transitioning to attack. I think that is really where he is so important. So keeping him healthy and having him around for the whole season is critical for the Red Bulls, as is Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting scoring goals. That is my specific prediction. I think he will score more goals this season than Dante Van Zier did in his 2 seasons with the team, which isn't
Say the bar, Taylor. Say the number.
It's
Say
not
how many
the
it
highest of bars. It's 8 goals Van Zier scored in MLS, 11 goals across all competitions. So I'll say the 11. I think Choupo-Moting scores so 12 goals or more across all competitions for the Red Bulls, because I think he's going to do a lot more for this team. I think he will be, even at his advanced age, a reliable player for them. And when you talk about his drawbacks, from what I have read and then from what I have seen, I don't think his passing creativity is particularly next level, and I don't think his shot efficiency is maybe as ideal as teams might want, but he is very strong in the air, obviously has size, but his numbers back up that he is going to win those 50-50s. He's going to win headers. He's going to be good off set pieces. But then he's also very good at making his own chances and taking people on in and around the box and then getting shots off, which maybe also explains the lower percentage. He makes his own shots, but then might be taking them from less advantageous opportunities. Something like that.
First try.
There we go. But the key thing, I think, would be just that an attack of Forsberg, some guy named Morgan Lewis, was it, Graham? Did I get that right? I'm doing it.
Yeah, that's nailed it. Yep, sure.
Lewis Morgan, the team's top scorer last season, I would say their most consistent and important attacker. Forsberg, Lewis Morgan, and Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, I think, will form a really strong front 3, especially when they catch teams on the break, especially when they're able to find some space in which to operate and have some kind of quick passes that pull defenses apart. I think there's going to be goals, and I think Choupo-Moting will benefit from that. It is worth noting that Van Zier was their assist leader last season, so if EMCM isn't able to replace those assists, then maybe somebody else will have to step up to do that work. But I still think that attack is going to look stronger than last season.
Stoke to Paris to Harrisburg, New
It's
Jersey.
a peculiar career path.
Do you wanna know-
I can't imagine many other players have had that.
On that note, here's a stat that I did not know until yesterday. So he first turned pro as a youngster for Hamburg in 2007. Choupo-Moting has now played for 7 clubs on permanent deals. He has never generated a transfer fee. He has always moved for free. His deal has always expired. Then he has moved, and that includes clubs like PSG and Bayern Munich. It has always been free transfers, contract winds down, and then he moves somewhere else. So yes, a very odd career. I should note there are other players in there like Carlos Coronel, Dylan Nealis, Sean Nealis, Noah Ele. They've got just like a lot of returning players, a lot of talent in there. I think, as always with the Red Bulls, it's can they put it together and can they elevate? Can they use that remaining DP spot? Can they add a few more pieces? Can they be where they probably should be as opposed to 7th in the East?
Wow. That is a great stat, Taylor. If anything, he's been Eric Maxim Choupo floating between deals.
There we go.
Piece.
That's
Very good.
outstanding work by you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your New York Red Bulls preview there. We go now to Mr. Graham Rutherford, who's going to tell us all about Orlando City, who were pretty solid last year, Graham, finishing 4th. And what are we
Joe's
thinking about
favourite team?
25?
My spiritual home, of course. My personal Rome. My personal Roman Empire. You get what I mean. I like Orlando.
That is a tragic statement for you to make, Graham.
I'd live there.
Wait,
quite happily
so
live there.
there's that thing of like ask your partner how often they think about the Roman Empire, and the answer tends to be like way too frequently. Is that what it is for you, Graham? Are you always thinking about Orlando?
So at what point do I disclose that I pay a Patreon fee for a guy in a helicopter who takes pictures of theme parks from the air? £5 a month. He's going to buy a reconstruct.
Not now, because that is just a whole can of
And
worms.
Ryan
that just got
follows him
opened.
on Twitter as
follow that
well.
guy. He's
I've
good.
noticed him. Because I've looked at his followers list and thought, well, there's not going to be anybody that I know who Ryan follows him. Yeah,
he's good. He's the real deal.
yeah.
Buy a reconstruct. Is it? Yeah.
Hey Taylor, do you
not
want to
even a
start
bit.
Taylor, do you want to start a different podcast where we don't do that?
Yeah.
And don't ever talk about that?
I don't even know what was suggested, but yes is the answer. 'cause
No,
if it
we didn't
involves
move on
Orlando-
while you were gone. to
Okay,
be
and
clear.
Ryan and
Nothing
I
changed.
can do our Orlando podcast about the theme
Yeah,
parks
that
and
sounds
stuff.
like a great deal. Let's
and
do
all
that.
the restaurants on International Drive.
No, don't
Yeah.
leave. Please don't leave. But also, let's move on from this.
Anyway,
as
let's talk about
soon
the
as
soccer
possible.
stuff. So 2024, it was a strange season for Orlando because they started very poorly. There was the Duncan Maguire saga where they brought in Luis Muriel as his replacement before Maguire had even been sold. Then his transfer to Blackburn fell through and Maguire ended up in this awkward situation where he's back in Orlando. And the first half of the season in general was pretty rough. I went to a game in April and they lost at home to Toronto, which kind of tells you everything you need to know about the first half of the season for them. They were struggling to create chances and they were down around the bubble of the playoff line. Then some things changed. So Martin Ojeda comes back in as the number 10. Hadn't been playing in that position for the first half of the season. Orlando starts stringing some results together. And they finished the season really strongly. And they actually go into the playoffs as the fourth seeds in the East. They see off Charlotte in the playoffs, of course. They end Atlanta's fairy tale run. And they host the Red Bulls in the conference final. It was right there for them to make MLS Cup for the first time. But the Red Bulls obviously were on a heater at that point. Won that game. I think a lot of Orlando fans still look at that as a missed opportunity for that team. And coming into 2025, Orlando have brought back the majority of that squad from last season, with one notable exception, Facu Torres. He's gone. He was their top scorer from last season, 15 goals. He's gone to Palmeiras in Brazil for a fee of 14 million euros. That is a good amount to get for him when you compare it to some of the other deals. You look at the Cucho deal. So in retrospect, that might end up being a good deal for Orlando. But nonetheless, it has left a hole in their attack because he was an important part of that hot streak to finish last season. In terms of some of the incoming signings, Nicolas Rodriguez has come in from Fortaleza in Colombia. He's a wide player. He's only 20 years old, but his creative numbers in Colombia were strong. He's got obvious technical ability. Should get a good amount of minutes over the course of the season. But Marko Pasalic is a more solid bet to be a key figure for Orlando in the wide areas. He's come in from Rijeka in Croatia. He's a Croatian international, was also in the books of Borussia Dortmund earlier in his career. He was at Stuttgart before then. So we're talking about a player with pedigree, and he's still only 24 years old, so that looks like a solid signing for Orlando. The other notable player that I would highlight who's come in is Atuesta, who listeners will remember from his two spells at LAFC. Of course, he was on loan at LAFC from Palmeiras last season. Orlando have jumped in there, got the permanent deal done. Of course, he's a central midfielder. Maybe didn't find his best form for LAFC last season, but MLS fans know what he did, what he has offered in the past, what his ability is to play forward in possession. And with Cartagena out for a long time as well, with an Achilles tear, Atuesta might have to hit the ground running for Orlando. So there's a fair amount of excitement around his arrival. In terms of how this team plays, it's still Oscar Pareja in charge of this team, so we know what we're going to get from Orlando at this point. We know he wants to get his players forward quickly in the attack. That's especially true of the wide players, excuse me. And Orlando want to progress the ball out to those areas from central midfield as often as they can. They also want to win the ball high up the pitch, which is something that Orlando didn't do so much in the first half of last season. I was looking through some of their underlying numbers to try and understand why the first half of the season was so much different to the second half of the season. And one of the biggest things that stood out to me was their high turnover numbers were a lot higher. I think they were like 2.2 in the first half per game in the first half, and they were up at like 5 for the second half of the season. So they want to be closer to the second half of the season number, clearly coming into 2025. And I think that's potentially related to Ojeda coming in as the number 10 and Ramiro Enrique starting to get get more opportunities at the 9 as well. You also can't talk about Orlando without mentioning their threat from set pieces, because a large percentage of their goals last season came from dead ball situations. So again, that'll be something they're looking to carry into this year. And these are all good qualities to have. One bad quality, one vulnerability is this is a team that sometimes struggles to strike the right balance between attack and defence. They can be defensively vulnerable. So according to Total Football Analysis, they conceded the 6th most shots in the regular season last year and had the fifth lowest save percentage, which doesn't say a lot for Pedro Gallese in goals for this team. He's still their starting goalkeeper as far as I'm aware. But even still, there was a process last season where Pareja figured this team out bit by bit. And then you add in Pasalic, you add in Atuesta to that. Cartagena will be back possibly by the summer. I've seen a wide variance in how long he is out for. I've seen some people say 2 months. I've seen some people say 7 months.
And Orlando have said nothing, although that might change by the time this is actually out there. But yeah, it's been cool how much we know about that for sure.
So hopefully, from an Orlando point of view, he's back at some point in the season. But nonetheless, he would improve them if he does get back on the field. So there is a chance that this team continues on an upward trajectory this season that started in the second half of last season. It would be helpful, however, if their highest paid player wasn't sitting on a DP spot and not contributing as much as Orlando hoped. Luis Muriel would when they signed him. But nonetheless, Orlando are I think still pretty well set for another decent season in the East. Taylor, you were going to jump in on Luis Muriel?
No, just that like what you are talking about right now. Just buckle up for my Toronto preview, my friends.
Oh baby,
yeah, that's another level. To round off my Orlando VSP is that the new Dark Universe land will be the best bit of Epic Universe when it. No, I'm kidding on. It's the.
Give me your money.
It will though, right?
Dark Universe looks incredible at Epic Universe when it opens.
Taylor,
in the
was
summer.
that you? I wasn't looking.
That was me.
That was amazing.
My real VSP is that
Thanks,
Atuesta will be closer to Martin Ojeda for key passes per 90 minutes than any other Orlando City player this season. So he could be ahead of him, he could be second, but basically Ojeda was averaging 1.8 key passes per 90 minutes last season. There was Torres was the closest to that mark, and then there was a big gap between those two and everyone else. I think Atuesta is going to fill that gap, and Orlando, they need progression from midfield out to those wide areas, and I think the bet they're making is that Atuesta is going to be that figure.
I love the Atuesta ad to cover for Cartagena. I got to be honest, I don't really believe in this Orlando team. I think they are going to be fine in the Eastern Conference this year. They'll probably make the playoffs. The bar should be higher, man. Orlando have been good but not great for years and years, and I think they probably got worse this offseason in that you mentioned Pasalic, Graham. He scored 10 goals in 3,400 minutes for the best team in Croatia. Like the best team, the team that had the most success and that had the most points over the stretch he was there. Like he dribbles a ton and doesn't produce in the final third. And I'm worried. I'm worried about him, and I'm worried about Muriel sitting on the bench for another season. I'm worried about them not having great answers at center back. I'm worried about Gallese not being a phenomenal goalkeeper anymore because he's really not. I think this team has a solidly high floor. I'd be shocked if they miss the playoffs. But I don't think they're making moves really in the Eastern Conference, and that should bum out Orlando fans. But maybe I'm wrong, in which case Orlando fans kindly yell at me and all that stuff when they inevitably win something this year.
Are you okay, Graham? Is that sit with you okay?
It's okay. I'll have a deep dish Uno's pizza to comfort
Just
myself.
as they do in Orlando, traditionally. All right, thank you very much, Graham. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, 2 more teams to look at, the Union and Toronto FC. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our Eastern Conference preview. Joe Lowry, the Union, Jim Curtinera, over. I'm not sure I have a great read on this team. Joe, what are we thinking?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a lot of people that feel like they've got a great read on this team. I'm certainly not really one of them. Let's go back to last season before we look forward. 37 points, 12th in the Eastern Conference, 23rd in Major League Soccer. It has been a long time since Philly had endured a season like 2024. There'd been 5 straight consecutive years. Nice, good English there, straight and consecutive. Of the Union finishing inside the top 4 in the Eastern Conference, and then they drop all the way down to 12th, missing the playoffs for the first time since 2017. There were uncharacteristic defensive errors. There were some brutal breaks in both boxes where the ball bounces just didn't go their way. And those things combined to see a team that had been undefeated for longer than anybody else in MLS to start the season spiral out of control very, very quickly. And Jim Curtin, 11 years into his tenure, paid for that spiral with his job. Sporting director Ernst Tanner was no longer seeing eye to eye with Curtin. Tanner wanted more pressing and direct attacks, and Curtin had shifted the style of play to be a bit more controlled. The results, Curtin was fired in November after the Union season was over, and the Union went searching for a new manager. So in comes Bradley Carnell. He is here, and he's going to play the way Ernst Tanner wants him to play. That's very much how the power dynamic is going to go in Philadelphia, and that's fine, because Bradley Carnell seems to want to play how Ernst Tanner wants to play. He helped make St. Louis City into the Red Bulls of the Western Conference when he was there right off the bat, and he is going to play an up-tempo, direct, vertical, high-pressing kind of style. That's going to be the Union way again this year. They're going to get back to their roots sort of in that way under Ernst Tanner. In terms of other incoming players, Bruno Damiani arrives as a striker, or is reported to be arriving soon as a striker, according to Tom Bogert. He will be the priciest addition of the offseason for Philly. He's coming over from Nacional and his native Uruguay in a deal that involves at least $3 million, according to Tom. He's expected to be a DP and very much fits the Union's DP mold of not being very high profile and not being very expensive. So we'll see how that goes. 13 goals in 2,700 league minutes in Uruguay last year. Is a traditional sort of box-lurking striker. Other players that have come in and out. Ian Glavinovic arrives to replace Jack Elliott, who left for the Fire in free agency. And Jovan Lukic, 23-year-old, spent most of his professional career in the top flight of his native Serbia. He arrives to help fill some minutes left by Jack McGlynn, who was moved over to the Houston Dynamo for a little over $2 million. The Union will not see all of that because they broke rules and took him out of the Red Bulls and NYCFC homegrown areas, but they will get at least a chunk of change from that move. And Leon Flack is also gone as well. He's moved back over to Europe. So there are plenty of minutes for Lukic to soak up in midfield. I already mentioned the tactical stuff. They really are going to be a super aggressive pressing team this season. Come the end of the year, I will be surprised if there's a single team in the East that surpasses Philly's pressing and attacking speed numbers. They're going to go to goal quickly, and they're going to come to the ball very, very quickly when you've got it. As far as optimism goes, the stats loved the Union last year. They finished with the fourth best expected goal differential in the Eastern Conference. And they brought back a bunch of good pieces from last season. Ty Bariba was hot last year. He's back up top. Daniel Gazdag was effective as the number 10 and continues to be. He's back. Kai Wagner is probably the best left back in all of Major League Soccer. He's back. Jakob Glesnes and Andre Blake should be back at least to being better than they were last year and probably something closer to, among the top tier of players at their respective positions at center back and goalkeeper respectively. Other reasons for optimism. I think there's a real chance that Ernst Tanner's vision for this club is a good one. You go through and look at the Union's results, and the pre-Tanner and during Tanner era results are very different. And Jim Curtin spanned both of those eras. And I think by and large did a fairly good job with the team that doesn't really spend on their first team roster. But man, Turner comes in and all of a sudden a lot of ninths and tenths and eighths turn into fourths and thirds and seconds. And oh my goodness, we almost won the double and did the Shield and MLS Cup only to lose both of those things to LAFC in 2022. And we did actually win a Shield along the way. I think Tanner's vision for this team is likely to be a good one. Now, that's not to say that he handled the Curtin thing very well. I think you maybe want to show a little bit more respect to someone who had been involved with this team for so long and is a beloved hometown character. But I do kind of believe that Ernst Tanner can do a better job than most CSOs in this league of finding undervalued talent like a new striker, like a new central midfielder, and Lukic. I think there is a real reason to believe that Tanner has a vision for this team and that it's going to be a pretty good one. Another reason for optimism, they're going to play the kids, and the kids in Philly are real good. Kevin Sullivan is the name that a lot of people know. I think he's in line for, maybe 1,000 MLS minutes this year. He's going to play in 2025 after making his debut last year. I also love Neil Pierre at center back. He's probably the fourth center back in this squad. I think he is a really talented young player who's got a bright future. The concerns for this team is that they didn't really get a lot better over the offseason. Damiani arrives. I don't think striker's a real position of need for this team between Ura and Baribo. Then you look elsewhere, central midfield isn't better. Lukic comes in, but I don't think he makes his team better in that part of the field. Maybe you get better by having him adhere to the aggressive pressing identity in a way that Jack McGlynn and Flack couldn't, but Flack is one of the better pressers in the league. Then you look at the defense, it's not better with Jack Elliott leaving. We can be almost certain of that, even with Glavinovic coming from Argentina. And I don't really think any line of this team is dramatically better. So even if the Union's replacements mixed with some better luck in both boxes helps them get back on par with their XG differential from last season, where they were supposed to be one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, even if that happens and these players get them back to that level after losing some key guys in the offseason, I think they're still going to be, at minimum, a tier, maybe 2 or 3 tiers below the true trophy favorites in the Eastern Conference, So yeah, there's a lot of familiar faces. Nathan Harriel, Glesnes, and Wagner in the back line. Andre Blake in goal. Quinn Sullivan and Gazdag in midfield. We'll also see Jean-Jacques in midfield, and he arrived last year. Ura and Baribo up top. There's a lot of names that we know, and a lot of proven MLS players in this team. I don't think there are a lot of truly great players in this team, and I don't think the Union are likely to keep up with the other teams in the East that have gotten better in 2025. So I am concerned about this team. My VSP is that no team in MLS will register more tackles in the final third than the Union. The Red Bulls, no, that's not you anymore. Taylor got to that in his preview. Sandro Schwartz wants to play with the ball. He told me that at MLS Cup this past year, and you could see it early on last season. The Union are the new New York Red Bulls in the Eastern Conference. They absolutely are going to be that in 2025. Pressing isn't just back on the menu in Philly. It is going to be the entire menu, I think, in 2025. They're going to have so many final third tackles. My bonus VSP is that I think we will see at least one Sullivan to Sullivan goal in 2025. Quinn Sullivan to Kevin Sullivan, Kevin Sullivan to Quinn Sullivan. Doesn't matter. I think we're going to see one of those, and it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to go viral. That's my VSP.
Slightly squared. Like to hear it, Joe. Love to hear it. Very good. All right, unless there's any more comments about the Union, Taylor, we can move on to our final team of our previews for the East. Toronto FC.
Oh, boy.
Last and perhaps last for this episode.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and spoil that now. My specific prediction is that they are winning that wooden spoon. They will be the worst team in Major League Soccer this season. Last season's summary, not great. In fact, it hasn't been great for quite some time. They finished 26th, 27th, and 29th, and then 22nd over the past 4 seasons. So that's progress in terms of overall standings. 11th in the East, I believe, last year. Outside of the playoffs, maybe you could argue, like, yeah, it's rebuilding. We're moving in the right direction. John Herdman is going to figure this thing out, except John Herdman then resigns in November after the drone spying scandal with Canadian soccer. So he is out the door. In comes Robin Fraser. He is now their 6th coach in 5 years, I do believe. So it is a lot of flux in terms of the management side, and then a lot of that on the player side. We'll talk about the one big name in a little bit. In terms of what they've done this season, 2 primary arrivals. They signed Norwegian striker Ola Brynhildsen, 25-year-old TAM striker, 73 goals and assists for Europa League/Europa Conference level teams. And then Theo Corbeanu. I'm going to say Theo Corbeanu. On loan from Granada. He's a 21-year-old attacking midfielder and winger who could end up as wingback, could end up as an attacking fullback. My guess is that if it's a front 3, he will be the kind of right-sided winger in that front 3 with maybe Federico Bernardeschi on the other side. We'll see. Who knows? But Corbeanu had solid numbers for chance creation and take on, as well as turnovers, interceptions, and tackles, as in he does a lot of defensive work. So basically can attack, but then can get back and defend, and I think will be a potential bright spot for Toronto this season. Downside, he's only played more than 1,000 minutes once, I believe, since he turned pro in the 2020-2021 season. That would be for Grasshoppers in the Swiss League in 2023. So he is not the most consistent in terms of minutes and fitness. The other, very worrying thing is that the writing seems to be kind of on the wall for Toronto, as evidenced by Thiago Andrade. Are we all familiar with this one? Because I was not till I previewed Toronto, and it's kind of amazing.
Go on.
Thiago Andrade, selected in the expansion draft by San Diego FC, but was immediately traded to Toronto in exchange for a first-round pick and $250,000 in GAM. So similar to what DC United did, they wanted a player, they made it happen. Except Andrade was not having it and forced to transfer to Japanese side Sanatsu Osaka. So basically, they did all of this roster maneuvering to get him to Toronto, and then he took one look around and said, I don't like the look of this at all. Sell me to Japan, please. And they did. So
wait, sorry, I have a follow-up on that, Taylor. Did he actually force the move? Because I hadn't heard that bit. I had heard that Toronto sort of had snagged him, and then we're thinking about, well, we'll either keep him or we'll make a bit of money on a transfer. Do you think there was something more there?
From what I read, he requested a transfer and did not wish to play for Toronto. That might have just been the one story that I read, the one article I read about him, but that was enough for me. So if that one article was wrong, it's their fault and not mine, and maybe a little Graham's, because why not? In terms of how we think they'll play...
You saw the bacon, Taylor. You saw the round bacon.
It's like, that's not bacon.
Gotta go.
I don't know what Japanese bacon is, but I'm going to go try that. I'm not trying this Canadian stuff. It's Canadian breakfast ham. That's what it is, Canada. Call it what it is. Under Robin Fraser in preseason, they've played a 4-3-3, which is itself another issue because they largely played a back 3 under John Herdman last year, so there's even more change with this team. There is some consistency. They've got Jonathan Osorio still the captain. Matty Longstaff will be in that midfield. Jack Price has been in and around there as well in preseason. Kobe Franklin, Raul Petretta are both sort of servants for the club. Richie Larea has not been in the full preseason, but I think is expected back soon. So some names we know, but the biggest name is Lorenzo Insigne, who is still there, and it is not great. He is on $15.4 million a year. That is the second highest salary in Major League Soccer, and he is not going to play. He has a no-trade clause, so the club prepared 3 different offers for him in the offseason, very much hoping he would move. It was to Venezia in Italy, Real Valladolid in Spain, and, of course, Sivasspor in Turkey. We knew Turkish Super League would be on that list somewhere. He rejected all those moves, so he is staying with Toronto, but at last I read, was not involved in preseason, had not been doing any training. I think was frozen out of the preseason photo. So I don't know if he's going to play for them at all this year. I would guess that he eventually comes back in, but there's going to be questions about fitness, about complacency, about work rate. It just seems like a very dysfunctional situation that Robin Fraser has inherited, and I feel some level of sympathy for him as he tries to figure that out, because there's also other issues, like the fact that their 5 best players are 35, 33, 32, and 30. They have 2 players younger than 23 who contribute anything from a roster perspective. Only 6 of them are under 25, so it's a very old squad who don't even have some of their key pieces playing. It doesn't really feel like it was assembled for this manager. I think it's going to be a very, very difficult season for Toronto with few bright spots. So I have them as your wooden spoon winners.
Wow. I'm slowly learning, Taylor, through these previews that say Chicago, Toronto, and people who buy MLS Season Pass when they have T-Mobile and they get it for free anyway. None of them are good with money.
I mean, Chicago, we'll see what happens this season. I have a little more optimism about Chicago, but their spending has been exorbitant. Hey, John Duran, though, they're getting that sell-on fee, so they can spend whatever they want, baby. They're just printing money. But yeah, Toronto and you make questionable decisions on the financial side. I mean, it made sense in the moment. It is worth noting, I think Toronto have a very strange relationship when it comes to designated player signings, because they whiff more often than I think I realized. It's just that Giovinco and Josie sort of paper over a lot of cracks and loom larger as being great bit of business. And then Michael Bradley comes in, even smarter business. But, I mean, there's a lot of Jermaine Defoe in there, too. It hasn't always been the smartest designated player signings. Insigne seemed like he would kind of be in the Giovinco mold, but he has not been the little horse that we all know. He has instead been a person who doesn't want to move and also doesn't really want to train. So we'll see what happens with him and with Toronto. Joe, am I off base here? Do you see any other reasons for optimism that I might have skipped over?
No, I don't think this team is going to be good. The Insigne hang up all offseason has really hurt them. Toronto wanted to move off Insigne to then be able to add a DP, and that just hasn't happened. Their cap situation has been a mess. I don't think they're getting the same buy-in from Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, their ownership, as they were in the past, and the sort of buy-in that allowed Bill Manning to spend reckless amounts of money on largely bad players. Bill Manning's gone. They have different leadership now. I think the Robin Fraser hire is a solid one to help rebuild the culture. He's been there before. This is just not a good team. If you're not getting any production from Insigne, and Bernadeschi is your only other true DP, Larea was listed as one last year. He's not a DP sort of level player in this league. This just isn't a good squad. They've done barely anything over the offseason. They're going to add a young forward who I believe had some success in Norway. Now is playing at Midtjylland in Denmark, according to Tom's reporting. It's just really, really hard to convince yourself that this is going to be a good team.
And so, agreed. And so even players that emerged from last season unscathed or in a sound situation, like Prince Osei Owusu.
He gone.
Yep, he gone. Top scorer last season, 9 goals for Toronto, now plays for Montreal. So they're not even able to kind of hold on to some of those talents. It is a very mixed bag of the players that remain. I have some sympathy for Toronto, who I think had that couple years of things looking really, really good, but I think have known some abject misery as well. So from a DC United supporter, I have sympathy.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, a fun note to end our Eastern Conference previews on. We'll be on the feed very shortly, talking all about the West. We're covering all 30 MLS teams on the feed this week. But for now, Taylor Rocco, thank you very much indeed for your contributions here, Toronto and otherwise.
You're welcome. I do feel bad. I like to have the previews be positive, but I'm not going to do like faux positivity. But generally speaking, when you read into a team, you start to be like, oh, this guy's going to be exciting, and this youngster's coming through, and they're going to be good. With Toronto, it's just every one of those is checked by like, oh, but this guy doesn't play for them anymore, and this guy left, oh, and that manager resigned, and this isn't good. It's just really hard to find the positives. Yeah. I apologize, Toronto supporters.
I think that's okay, Taylor, because previews in general tend to skew positive because we're always trying to find the positives in these things. But at the end of the day, half the teams aren't going to be happy with their position at the end of the season, right? That's just how a league table works. So
yeah, I think so.
It is what it is.
I think so. I haven't fully looked at the West yet, so I might be wrong. There may be way worse Western teams out there that will beat Toronto to the wooden spoon if that's how that works.
You might want to look inside the East at DC before you cast your eyes over to the Western Conference, Taylor.
I didn't care for that at all.
Sorry.
All right. Well, on that note, Joe Lowry, thank you very much for your insight as always, sir.
Thank you, Ryan, for everything but the theme park chat on today's show.
Okay, well, thank you especially for your Orlando expertise, Graham Ruthven.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey, fellow subscriber of Guy in a Helicopter above Orlando.
It's a drone, surely,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
It's not a helicopter, right?
I think it's a helicopter, yeah. I think it's
What?
Yeah.
He's chartering a helicopter for this?
That's why he needs my $5 a month.
He
through
certainly
Patreon.
does. He certainly does. He's got a theme park ride of his own up there. Wonderful stuff. Thank you very much, listener, for joining us on this. As noted, Western Conference previews coming to the feed very shortly. But for now, bye.